the adaptation and changes that we all have to face that give us the strength to move through the mountains like that are useful in life. You know, might not make me successful at business, might not make me successful as a filmmaker, may not make me successful as a code writer, you know, in a computer, but at least, you know, those fundamental caring for other people, looking out for your partners and trying to contribute, those are skills from the mountains, I think, that should be ingrained in everybody's identity.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stokely. How are you doing? Good? I really hope so, because today our guest is filmmaker and explorer Ben Clark. Now, Ben Clark blew me away with his positivity when we first met, so much so that I really needed to find out a little bit more about him. Throughout the course of the weekend, I was blown away by the heart that this guy held. I looked into his work a little bit more after we met. He's gone on to do some really incredible things throughout his life. He's created some sports documentaries, such as the Snowman Trek, which has won incredible awards such as the iTunes Best Sports Documentary Award. He's then gone on to create a series called Run Around the World, which has received incredible reviews and a lot of attention throughout the last couple of seasons in the trail running and ultra world. At the age of 23, Ben was the youngest American to lead a team at Mount Everest, and we talk about why you don't ever talk about that. Ben went on to document a lot of the work that he did throughout his exploration years, setting up first ascents in countries such as Tibet, China, and the United States, as well as laying down some first ski descents on some of the biggest mountains in the world. Ben has done a lot of, as he says, insane shit. And the thing that really surprises me about Ben is he's remained so grounded to this day about it. And really, he's just got a heart of gold. The way he views life these days and the way he shares his feelings about that are really a great example for a lot of us to follow. That's really why I wanted to speak to Ben and get him on this podcast, because through Ben's storytelling, it really is connecting with just humans. I'm just so stoked to have this conversation with him because it just allowed us to have another opportunity to connect, and now I'm really stoked to be able to bring this conversation to you. I really hope you enjoy it. And if you did, guess what? Yes, that's it. Stokely has got an Instagram account, and it is at Stokely Podcast. So you can send us a message there and let us know what you think. Before we get to the episode, just one last thing. I'd like to invite you to join me in paying respect to the people and the beings everywhere who keep the law of the land. I'd like to pay our respects to the traditional and rightful custodians of all the places where this podcast is created and listened to, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So, everyone, this is Ben Clark.
Dude, I can hear you with full and total clarity.
Excellent. And I can hear that amazing accent of yours again. That's brilliant.
Oh, shit.
I've missed it. I feel like every time I'm hanging out with you, I'm hanging out with like the new age John Wayne or something. I've got no idea what he sounded like, but yeah, you've got that. So I appreciate that about you, man.
Hey, can't escape being not only American but from the South.
It was a really welcomed surprise when I got to meet you in New Zealand at the start of this year. I was like, damn, I've got to hang around with this guy all day. This is going to be great.
Dude, I kept just trying to find extra days to add on to our trip to Japan. Like, I was like, all right, I'm going to do some long runs. I'm going to like keep finding reasons to hang out longer. And then I was like, and then after that, I'll start trying to find some time for UTA and Western. I was like, shit, we're buddies, man. We're just like, you're gonna fucking do this year all across the world. Maj is my guy.
Man, and it just in about a week's time, it all just went from planned to completely like there was a new plan, a completely new plan.
Dude, you know, that's life. We just kind of have to like I've gotten to the point where I have no expectations. There was like a moment where I was like, oh man, like, you know, I was just like, knew when we came to Tennessee from New York, I told myself there's going to be a point in time in the next 2 weeks where there's going to be this tipping point. And like at that point, I just gotta like whatever's happened in the past is past. Whatever happens in the future is just going to be negotiable, to be determined later. And at that chaotic tipping point, it's just going to be chaos, and I'm just going to just be in the moment and not try to make any plans. Plans for later in the day are fine, but but beyond that, it was like just whatever's coming, it will come. People will tell me when it happens. I will not be the one that that makes those decisions. So yeah. Oh man, that's how. I mean, that's it. That's all you can do, right? Give up.
Yeah, honestly, like really, you're exactly right, because you see how people create this like internal suffering due to this whole thing, because there's
Yeah.
this just fight against it, and
Yeah.
it's painful to see, and don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
it's not. Don't get me wrong, like there's some legitimate things that are going south, and it's really really upsetting. And 100%, like 100% respect to that situation and feeling that and being in the emotions that come
Yeah.
with it. But when someone starts complaining about not being able to go get a coffee, or someone's complaining about there like not being like the right kind of rice available at the supermarket, that's when you're just like, are you kidding me? Like, wow,
Dude.
okay, let it go.
Yeah. It's just kind of have to reset your life to, I don't know, all these years that I used to spend in the Himalayas in base camps climbing big peaks. It's basically that's the same thing I'm doing right now. There's always the underlying anxiety of like you would start to, you had 60 days to be in the country, or 50 or 40 or whatever it was, and you're sitting below this peak, and you've got this like big risk you're going to take. Like there's some exposure there, right? And the anxiety level feels very similar, because like just going to the post office, you're like, man, is this okay? Like I got gloves, I have a mask on, like nobody wants to talk to me. I don't want to touch the pen I have to sign my name with. Like, you're just kind of freaked out. And then it's like, in the Himalayas, you'd be like, well, I know I fly out of here June 1st, or I know I fly out of here like May 15th. Here, you're just sort of sitting at the base of the mountain, and you're like, well, I know we're going to keep eating 3 meals a day, in this base camp, try to sleep at night. And then during the day, make my little roundabout walk around camp, see what's happening. That's as big as life gets. And then that's it, until finally it breaks and we know we have to go somewhere. It's crazy.
Yeah, man. It's like, yeah, it's a real new world. We're all living in a new world. And yeah, man, I'm stoked that you already have mentioned the Himalayas, because like what I wanted to do is like, I met you in New Zealand recently this year, and I was like, I got this message. I think it was a message, or it might have even just been an email. It was like, hey, there's this guy flying out, and you need to take him around with you for the day on race day, and kind of just bring him into your world for the day, and take him around if you can. And I was like, initially, we'd been working through the logistics of what it was going to look like on race day. And it looked like it was going to be, a car in the morning to the start, 3 boats, another car shuffle, run here, run there, etc., etc. And I was
getting wet.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to talk about why it's so bad to get Ben's feet wet in the day. And it was just like, geez, man, like I'm struggling to sort this out just for myself. Now I've got to take this other guy around. And then anyway, after about 10 minutes of meeting you, I was like, this guy is come from an amazing part of the world in himself. And I think like whatever this journey this guy's been on has been rad, because he's just such a positive, awesome dude. And
back at you, man. I was so psyched that you were gracious enough to let me tag along.
Yeah,
I get the same email that's like, you're gonna go hang out with this dude, and it's like, well, all right, I guess it's like there's nothing like flying to a completely different country you've never been to, meeting a completely different team of people that you've never met, and being like, hey, let's go get into a really high stress, creative environment and see if we get any shots or not. It's like, it could be a total crapshoot, you know?
Yeah.
I was,
That was one thing about you, like, you know what, man, like I'm gonna get the shots, but you know, like I'm just, you know, even if I don't, like I'm not gonna worry about it. It's just the way things are going, you know. And there's
yeah.
a real calming confidence behind being okay with that.
Yeah. Sometimes it happens, you get it. Sometimes you don't. If you carry that weight forward with you, you're just going to mess the next one up.
And and uh, and also with that, I think it was just yeah, you know. And if you were an absolute arsehole, I've worked with plenty of assholes. I can do it. You know,
Yeah.
it would have been fine too.
You manage me well for the asshole that I am.
I guess
You're a
so.
great manager. You're a great manager.
I think it's likewise. Likewise, yeah. Absolutely. I think there was a couple of times there I'm yelling at you in the bush, Ben, hurry up. And
I'm
anyway.
like back there struggling with a pack on, running down the trail, like behind Sage Canaday with like a camera trying to keep it stable while I'm running with a pack on. You're like, I'll be there.
It was brilliant, mate. It was brilliant. But man, so like over that time you got to drop a couple of stories from your past that I was just like blown away by, absolutely blown away by. And you know, you're very humble about what you've done in the past and what's got you to where you are now. But if you're up for it, it'd be great to have a conversation with Ben Clark and just find out a little bit more about him.
Totally, man. Open book today.
Awesome. I like it. So, mate, how about we start? You know, I'll set a bit of a scene, and then you can just take it from there if you want. Correct me if I'm wrong. I often get these things out by a year or two, which I kind of find pretty funny. But so at the age of say 23, you climbed Mount Everest, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so I assume that, you know, you weren't 22 when you started climbing, and then you just, you know, in 1 year was a pro and then went and climbed Mount Everest. Can you take us back to that time and what you were doing as a 23-year-old on the top of Mount Everest?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Everest was the very first sort of adventure that I could wrap my head around. Grew up in Tennessee, which is, you know, luckily where I'm actually sitting right now because I'm here to look after my parents during this awkward time. And growing up here, you know, like people hunt, they fish, they play golf, they run track, they might play football or baseball, all the ball sports that US is so well known for, right? And team sports. And, you know, after that, you kind of go to college or you go to uni and there's like, you know, unless you were really good at those things, it's probably over. You know, there's not another way, not another level of sort of, you know, uh, anticipation of sports or a reason to stay fit because you go to uni to get your degree and then, you know, you're probably going to be sitting at a desk for a long time. And I was lucky enough to just discover in the very first sort of months of my time at the university the Smoky Mountains in East Tennessee. I went to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville to learn architecture. And I looked, you know, at certain high points in the city, I could look out and I could see the Smoky Mountains. And I was like, man, I want to go check those out. You know, I'd always had this curiosity to like, I'd see a peak or I'd see a valley and I'd think, what would it look like above there and over there or down in that? Like, what's over there? So that curiosity was just always kind of forcing me to want to experience places and see things I just had, you know, just hadn't seen, couldn't have seen by that age. And luckily, I met a really great guy, a friend who had through hiked the Appalachian Trail the summer before. And so he shows up my freshman year of college and he's got a beard and he's, you know, been to Everest Base Camp. He's, you know, got off of high school early to go do the AT. And I was like, man, this guy is cool and likes adventure. And I want to learn. I want to go to the Smokies with him if I go at all. That's who I want to go with because I want to learn from him. And his name was Ben Delosier. And Ben ended up teaching me so many great skills about the mountains, about hiking, about, you know, life in general. It became my first real like mountain buddy. And I was working in an architecture firm at that time, interning, and I was working as a janitor at the local aquatic center. And I bought my hiking equipment doing that, and then decided that first summer that I would go and climb Mount Rainier outside of Seattle, which is one of the famous 4,000 plus meter peaks in the US. And so I signed up, I went, I did a guided climb, made it to the top. And Ben Delosier and I had been at a Appalachian Trail event in Damascus, Virginia, just prior to that, called Trail Days, where he had picked up this book about all the 14,000 foot, the 14ers in Colorado. And he was like, this is my next big goal. Now that I've done the AT, I'm going to do this. So I go climb my peak. I call him as soon as I get off the summit back down to, Seattle to fly out. And I'm like, hey, sign me up. Let's go. I've already climbed one. I'm pretty sure that, we should go do this. I'm willing. So he's like, all right. So I like sell my Michael Jordan rookie card, like cash in some money I had gotten for, that I'd saved since graduation out of a mutual fund. And the next summer quit my job and damn near dropped out of school and just said, let's go live in the back of my truck and let's just commit to climbing all these peaks. And it was like, today people do van life and they do all this other really like kind of premium stuff. They have mattresses, they have like a way to cook, they have a refrigerator, maybe their partners with them. We were two dudes. There was like Colorado. We were always like, God, there's nothing to do in Colorado. Like, in like 1999, you're like, there's nothing to do here. We were too young to go out to the bars. We couldn't, or 19. So we just spent that summer just damn near trying to kill ourselves every day with no idea what we're really doing, totally walking underneath dangerous mountain stuff, cornices, avalanches, wrong season. And we survived it. We climbed like 27 of them in the first like 50 days. And I was like, man, this has been really cool. And I had saved up from working that year as well. And so at mid-July, I went down and I did a seminar in Bolivia where I learned how to climb my first 6,000 meter peak. So I climbed the Huayna Potosí in Bolivia with a group of guides. And they were like, dude, if you've climbed all these 14ers now and you came down here and you followed these directions and you were excited to get up to the top of this mountain and you enjoyed it, you should come try out to become a guide on Mount Rainier next year. So I said, okay. So in the middle of the year that year, I went back to school, didn't pay much attention. Middle of the year, I went to Mexico, climbed Pico de Orizaba and Iztaccíhuatl, and then went to Rainier that I guess that May or April, tried out, got hired, and couldn't believe it. And I was just like, man, I can't believe I'm 20 years old now. I'm a mountain guide on Mount Rainier and meeting all of the big mountaineers of the 1980s and 90s were all living out there guiding at that time. That was like the epicenter of Himalayan mountaineers for the United States at that time. So those folks were, eager to help me learn and taught me a lot of great skills. And, most importantly, all the great advice you need to be a guide, not just a mountaineer with a lot of strength. And from there, they rewarded me for trying to work hard and trying to just say yes, show up, say yes. Like, sure, I'll make dinner. Sure, I'll dig out that tent platform. Sure, I'll carry 10 extra ropes. Like, I'll take all the food. I don't care. I'm just here. I can't believe I'm a kid from Tennessee that gets to do this, And so I started to get started getting opportunities to guide Denali and then Aconcagua back down to the Mexican volcanoes. And then it came up that it was like, hey, you should join us on this Everest trip next year. And I thought, wow, I would love to do that. What's it going to cost? And so, I started to kind of figure out that I wasn't going to be guiding Everest, which was fine with me. But if I could find a way to get on an Everest trip at cost and go climb it at 21 or 22, you bet I was going to try and do that, man. Because you didn't have anything to worry about. It's like no obligations, no future, no past, nothing. So yeah, ultimately I did drop out of school at that time. And right around then, 911 hit, when the Twin Towers were attacked in New York City, and a television network had been interested. I had been going all over the place trying to find anyone that would fund this trip to Everest and help me get there. And a television network had wanted to do it. And they suddenly, when 911 hit, they just lost all their advertising dollars. And it was just, it was just devastated because I was 22 and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'll never have another shot at this. And so instead, I continued reaching out to people that worked in television, and eventually the founder of EchoStar Communications, which is Dish Network, a very respected businessman in the United States, but also a very shrewd operator, was like, you know what, you have a lot of courage and you have a lot of guts, but he basically dressed me down for all the things that I wasn't, and then said, but I'll invest in you and see if you can do this. And I decided I wanted to try and learn to climb a different 8,000 meter peak first with the same group that was going to go to Everest, then switch their objective to Dhaulagiri. So tried it with them. We didn't make the top, but I learned a lot. And then the next year he said, all right, well, you survived that at least. What's it going to cost for you to go to Everest? What are you going to do? And I was able to assemble a TV crew on my own with wonderful people who had found me and done some stories on me. And the Dish Network underwrote it. And I went to Everest with that crew. And I was lucky enough to be led up there by some really great creatives to understand that process, to learn how to make a movie, and then partnering with some local Sherpa who I'd climbed with the previous year to lead the expedition to the top and to become the youngest person ultimately to have ever led a trip to the top. And it was important to me in all of that process. If you take anything away, I really highly encourage people invest in good education. Get a guide, just like if you're a runner, get a coach, try to learn the fundamentals from other people. And then later, when that became my 10th international expedition, I could make my own decisions and I could also blow it really hard. Or if I got lucky, like I did, and I stayed healthy and I didn't try to rush through the process, I was lucky enough to sneak up to the top. And that is a place where from then on, any room I walk into, the second someone realizes I've done that, it's like, it doesn't matter if you went to Harvard or Yale or Princeton or Oxford. It's like, no one cares anymore. They just want to talk about that. so yeah, that's the story, dude. That's Everest in a nutshell.
I mean, it's so good, man. You just like a young, motivated dude, just followed your nose, and that's where you went, where your heart was telling you to go. It's so awesome to hear.
Yeah, it was a different time too, because back then it was like, the internet had just kind of broken. I mean, it was like internet 1.0. So to have not just been looking in like books and encyclopedias to know how to do that was, it was kind of like, well, how could you resist not wanting to go to Everest? You could see it now.
Yeah, because you guys, you did, you then went on to do a lot more in the Himalayas, and I think there was a film that you and your crew created about hitting up the north face of the Himalayas back in the day, and I could only imagine that would have been, like you say, it wasn't the world it is now, where you can find movies on everything and YouTube and
right,
etc. Like, so back then to put something together must have been, I mean, you must have been doing something that you had some sort of a intuition about, but just never really knew where it was going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I was a classically trained visual artist. I just have a lot of curiosity and I like to learn. And, I usually get so excited about learning the types of things that I do because I'm more driven artistically than I am, by pretty much any other pillar of life. Like finance doesn't motivate me. I think a lot of other things that motivate people maybe just kind of are distractions to me. And I just kind of felt like to be able to do this stuff, I was going to have to learn a way to communicate why it was important. Right. And then in doing it, to figure out a way to try to make a contribution, because exploration so much of it had been about sort of conquest before, and in this generation it's more about the why than it is the we have to get this done. There you don't have to be the first anymore. Now it's like, what's the point in doing this? What is the journey? And that first film was when I put out Everest the Other Side in 2005, it was about the journey. It wasn't about the accomplishment. To me, it had been this like really crazy process that this was my best way of sort of explaining to people after the fact why it was important to do it. And then of course it led to this world of possibility, because once altitude isn't the factor, kind of like 100-mile distance runners, once you've done it, you're like, oh, all right, where does this go from here? Do I do less and go faster? Do I stay lower and try to ski? I mean, where does it go? And I think that gave me some confidence and some experience, and still with a healthy dose of willingness to take risks to try to move forward and see what would happen in life.
Yeah, because so that did that take you then into I guess really the next few years of laying down first ascents and first ski descents and things like that within the Himalayas?
Yeah. I ended up really focusing on, I think from 2007 until 2012 was really like the years where skiing became more important to me than alpine climbing. I had really focused on and got proficient at doing new routes in like rock, ice, bouldering, trad, sport, because I had a really great crew in Southwest Colorado in Telluride. I moved to Telluride, Colorado specifically to just focus on mountain climbing. I was working for a newspaper, and so I did that, and I worked for a TV station as a host at the same time through those years. So it was like naturally, because I was in this town that had 8 to 10 weeks off a year because it was a ski town, going to the Himalayas and having the ability to train year round, and then getting some great sponsors like Mountain Hardwear and Osprey Packs and Sterling Ropes and Garmont, like all those folks back in the day, enabled me to go out there and just push. And I really wanted to, and my partners, Josh Butson, John Miller, Tim Clark at that time, like definitely have to credit those guys with, having the vision to also come in there and participate on different expeditions. We would go and we were, literally just set up to fail, and just wanted to just see what was there, place our eyes on it, go places that people hadn't been, climb peaks that weren't even named, and just see what wilderness was about and disconnect. It was right at the time where, becoming a digital native was an important part of like being a 20 something year old at that time, between 2000 and 2010, and I was really resistant to it because I wanted this connection to the natural world that was really like kind of undisturbed, and to document it and then bring it back and then share it digitally. And, I felt like that it was important to bring it back and share it. But at the same time, all I wanted to do until pretty much until May of 2012, when I did my very last first ski descent, that was every single decision was driven by how does this get me to the Himalayas this year to do something crazy, Whew.
That must have been wow, man, nice work. Good on you.
Just committing.
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, Telluride's a beautiful place down Colorado there.
Home.
It's certainly a different place, the Himalayas as well. So you're sitting there in Telluride, and you've got all these ideas about what's going to happen, where you're going to go, what things are going to look like, what things are going to feel like. But then you go to the Himalayas for a period of time, and then what were the things that you came back to Telluride with that you totally didn't expect to gain from doing trips like that out to those places and those cultures? And like, what were the things that really just blew you away outside of the like high fives at the top of a peak and the high fives at the bottom of like a first ski descent?
I have to say I don't really like the person I was at that time, because the person that I had to be the person I wanted to be was the person I was. So I'm not saying that I was I'm certainly not embarrassed of the person that I was in doing that. But really, like, I think I was struggling with trying to figure out my own place in the world, you know? And like, of course, when you're constantly seeking, like, it's your own place in your world is between your two ears most of the time. And, at that time, I was so focused on the doing, the action of like getting to the mountains and trying to explore that like I was really enjoying sort of the meditative state that I would get from blocking everything out just to pull off these moves, right? And there was only a couple of times I can think of where I was in that state and I got interrupted by something. I could really focus when I was doing it. And that's a pretty selfish ambition to have to be like, hey, I just want to go somewhere so I don't think about other stuff. Even though I love this activity, I realized that that focus was something that I really needed and I didn't quite understand it. um la- Later I read a book about running and meditation. I was like, oh shit, I could have just been like sitting here for 10 minutes a day for a little while, and that might have also helped me block some of those things out. not, not gonna say it was a waste of time, but boy did I have a lot to learn. And so, I did all that stuff, and it was kind of it was fun. It was worthwhile, but it was also kind of foolish looking at the amount of risks that I took. And sometimes like I didn't die, but I had friends that died around me, not with me on my expeditions. But I lost a lot of friends during that time. I've continued to lose a lot of friends during that time, and I realized that doing that, there was a certain level of separation that almost anyone in your life has to have from you. So like I would come back from this like really amazing like accomplishment, right? Which was just surviving. Whether we made the top or not, we were always like, man, that was awesome. We get back to Kathmandu, we're drinking some Tuborg beers, we're having some chicken chili. We're like, oh, whatever, fire and ice pizza. Cool, it was a great trip. Come back home, nobody's frostbit. Everyone lost 20 pounds for no good reason, and now we can't climb 5'2". We got to build all our strength back. And but I would come back and I'd realize it was like people were really worried for me. They were really concerned for me because they knew I was I believed that everything would work out, but they were really worried for me. And it took me making the decision. I always knew if I had children that I was going to back off, and I didn't know how backed off I wanted things to be, but I knew in 2012, the last time that I clicked into skis in the Himalayas, we had just done a first ski descent off a peak called Chulu West. It's 21,600-foot peak. And I skied right down to the tent. My friends were like, man, why did you ski that last sliver of shit snow back there? Like, and I was like, I'll tell you tomorrow. And we descended this alpine route that we climbed, this 5-6 rock climb, couple rappels. We had the skis on our backs. I mean, we'd done this really well executed, safe, but really like just overly technical route. And we got back to base camp, and I just said, they're like, so what's the deal with the skis? And I was like, oh, I'm retiring. And everybody was like, why? What? Like, this is your jam. This is like all you give a shit about, And I was like, well, I'm going to have a little boy. And, I don't want to, I don't care. I think it's time for me to explore that part of my life. I always knew, it's 10 years of doing this. I always knew in 17 different expeditions in 10 years that if I survived and I got to a point where someone else depended on me, then I needed to be present for that. And oh my God, like, wrestling with the person that I really am and needed to be as a father, and settling into that role from this person who really just wanted to block everything out so that I didn't blow it in these really consequential moments, has been ultimately the better part of my life, the better half of my adult life, if I could say so. And it's because finally everyone that was pissed at me for taking all those decisions, taking all those risks and making all those decisions, had a chance to kind of rain on my parade, let me know what a jerk I had been, let me know that they were worried about me, and that the embarrassment that I had from that, and not knowing, not being aware that there was this love out there for me, and not being willing to like value that more. I needed to reconcile that with people, kind of like an addict has to go and reconcile all the mistakes they make through alcohol or drugs or whatever. I was sort of having to like, face down being just a guy on the ground now and not the dude in the mountains crushing it. And, having that care, knowing that people care about me and knowing that I have that love and that I have that love to give too is just a way better and way more enriching way to go through my life. And there's being alive in that moment that's really important, and we all need to find those moments, but at the same time there's like, being alive with other people and connecting with humanity and receiving all the kindness and love and forgiveness that people have is just way more fun, a lot more wild and crazy when it comes down to it. Mountains are rock, ice, snow, and it's up to you. Whereas every day I'm taught something new by my daughter. It's just crazy.
So, bro, wow, that sounds like we're going to get back to that transition because that sounds like a whole expedition in itself. Like
It's life.
So, you said when I asked you what did you come back with and with the experiences you didn't expect, if you were to go back there now and you did exactly the same thing, what would the differences be in terms of like, now this, like these other things that you're, I guess, more aware of, maybe like more grateful for? How would you have been a different character to the people that you were around as opposed to, the person you were back then?
I think I would have recognized that people were really worried, and that no amount of, when you're, and I saw this with other people too. It was helpful to see the wake of some friends die, to have to talk to their parents to understand the wake that's left behind you when that happens. Sometimes having to, like I had a friend who died, and his mom, he had been estranged from his mom for 15 years. And when I met her, I had been filming with him a bunch right prior to that. And she told me the story of seeing him in his coffin. She had 1 hour to see him in the morgue before, and her just trying to unwind who he was back, like just sort of reverse learn about his life and the decisions that were made up to that point, was like, just that split moment just made me realize it was like, there are 1,000 summits that don't matter, and there's all these starry nights and all this powder flowing over my head when I'm going down the hill that no longer matters, because he and I both value that more than anything. And yet my mom and dad have me, whether I agree with them on every single point in time, or they want to hear whatever crazy thing I'm getting into next, they always tolerated it. And I just thought about what it would have been like for them not to have any of those answers. And so I think that for me, similar to my friend who died, you're just going through life kind of bullshitting everybody that the data is going to support that you're making a good decision. Like, I've got this many years doing this, I've done this many routes, I know this about snow science. And I believed all that. And now I look at it and I would say, you know what, today I would be faster, I would eat better because I know more about nutrition. And I would set my goals higher and bigger than I did back then. But I would never be able to accomplish them, because I would rather be with the people that actually love me, because that time is going to run out, and I didn't think back then of that time ever being limited. And, so the guy I am today would just say, well, you've already spent all that time, and doing it differently. I would look at everyone else and say, you know what, you're actually sitting next to me right now. So instead of trying to fire you up and think you should also go to the mountains and be your best self, how about I just listen to you and learn from you, and maybe, like just be a friend instead of trying to like just be a disciple of, crazy stuff. Yeah, that would be the difference.
I love how you've labeled yourself a disciple. That's very fitting, man. I think you
I loved it, and it was religion to me. I mean, every day, like every day, I just what am I doing to get back to the Himalayas? How am I going to go be in that place? I mean, it was just such a genuine love, similar to a love you would have with a human being. I mean, it was just a real love for being there in that environment.
Do you recall one of the ascents or descents to be like a standout for you for whatever reason you choose it to be a standout if you look back at the time you spent over there?
Yeah, in 2009, we were climbing a peak called Barunse, and at the time we were broadcasting back to CNN in America. So we'd had I don't know, like 6 or 7 broadcasts leading up to the point that we start climbing up this feature on the northeast face of Barunse that was a very steep spine running up the mountain. Like, when you see the epic ski descents that people do these days and they're ripping these really steep spines, with snow going off either side, we were climbing something like that, but it was steeper and it was icier because the snow in the Himalayas sticks to really steep environments, but it stays because the sun melts it down and makes it into ice a lot faster. So we climb up this thing that's got some pretty difficult rock climbing in it. And we're climbing, above 6,000 meters and climbing pretty hard. I mean, 5, 6 RX, there's really no protection. I've got skis on my back, a big pack. I'm always leading because I don't have I would rather know how hard it is because I'm doing it than watch someone else suffer through it and be down there cold and belaying them. So I just always love going first because the chances statistically were that I was going to be more comfortable with that mentally and emotionally. And so we get up to this particular spot at around 21,600 feet. And that afternoon, this is where things get so crazy. Is John Miller, Josh Butson, and I are this 3-person team. We are essentially failing up on this route. We carried the lightest amount of kit. We were, alpinists to the core, simple, pure, no bullshit. Because we were going to summit and then ski down the other side, and none of that type of stuff was being done in the Himalayas, like at all. Definitely not like hard alpine climbs coupled with skis and skiing down. And yeah, we were climbing up, and I remember the day turned in such a way that I recall looking across valley, and when I say across valley, like miles across valley, over at Lhotse, which is the peak that's right next to Everest. And the Lhotse south face is a 12,000 foot tall south face, so just under 4,000 meters of climbing, vertical relief. And I remember looking over at it, and the storm was really turning. It was getting late in the day, near sunset, probably an hour out from it. And I watched what I believe was the jet stream. It was so large, it kind of impacted the middle of the face, like the middle kind of third of the face. It hit the face, and I watched it disperse. Like I watched all this snow and wind and everything just blow across that face. It's miles away from me. And the scale of it's like 2 miles long. So like almost 3 kilometers wide, and then, almost like 2 kilometers high. And I thought to myself, oh my God, living people don't see stuff like this, like, and I'm with these 2 ice tools, and I'm steep. It's like, 75-degree ice, and I'm just another 100 meters away from this ledge we're going to chop out and spend the night. And I remember we get to that ledge, and, it's not very big. It was big enough for 3 people to sit on. And we hunkered down, threw a bunch of ice screws in there, roped off everything we possibly could, anchored everything we could. And the 3 of us were just sitting in this barely, quite collapsed tent. My feet on my friend John Miller's gut, where he's warming up my toes. I'm holding his hands so that he can bend over and throw up in a Ziploc bag in between my legs. Right?
Oh my God.
29 years old, proud. And we sat there for 4 more nights and 5 days. And by the end of it, we had been through this mega storm. Everyone locally thought we were dead. Everybody at CNN thought we were fine because we were like emailing and stuff. And we couldn't tell anyone that John ended up having this what's called an anacroid cyst in the back of his brain. So basically, he had like a golf ball sized cyst in the back of his brain that when his brain began to swell because we weren't moving at all, he started to kind of lose his mind. And he lost sensation on the whole right side of his body when we emerged from the tent and had no choice but to then descend. And like, to circle this back, I had said we were failing up on this route, meaning there was no option for descent. Descending was likely to kill us. So we just went fast, like total commitment, like just like all out. And all of a sudden we either going to have to leave John there, climb over the mountain and he's dead, or we're going to have to risk our lives to try to get him down off the mountain in the one way we know that we can do it. That's highly likely to kill us because it was right underneath a gigantic hanging serac, big glacial band of ice that was falling every day, several times, generally in the night. And we didn't find out till we stood him up outside the tent that, he just suddenly lost all the feeling. And we're like, damn, we have no choice to go up. We can't. So we rappel him down, we lower him down, and he gets, down there to Josh. And then I'm taking the anchor apart and getting myself down there. And it tells Josh that he can't feel anything. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my God, we're not going to be able to rappel this because we're going to use all these we're going to have to build the ice anchors in the snow to do it. And I thought we're basically going to have to traverse over with John into this gully that will kill us. And that's our only option to get him down, like out of here, because we couldn't lower him down or do anything efficient. And we just needed to get him in a place where he could slide down and we could just run with him. And man, it was epic. And the fact that we survived, it's like, look, man, there are forces greater than luck out there, but luck played a huge part in that. And beyond that, it was those forces that got us through it. And I totally went back to Telluride and was like, man, I can't wait to go back next year for that. We had done the hard part, but I never went back. And someone contacted me this year, kind of rediscovered that I had been up there and had done that. And he's a pretty bold young alpinist. And, I was wishing him luck on it. But he couldn't go because all the Himalayas shut down with COVID-19. But yeah, I mean, that would be the one that stands out the most. That was the one where, we almost lost our partner, but we pulled through and all of us saved each other's lives in that moment. And it was, I still walked away from it completely unfazed. Like, why wouldn't we go back? We knew what we were going to encounter.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, that's an insane amount of love for what you did back then.
It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, dude, you could look out the tent and you're looking at Makalu, Everest, Lhotse. We just peer out, and if there was ever a break in the storm, we'd be like, wow, we are on a 7,000 meter peak. We're up here. We were like 500 meters from the top. They're like, all we have to do is get over this one last sort of like, it wasn't even a hard ice climb. It was pretty, if John were even 50%, we could have done it. But it just meant more to save his life. And we had already taken away as much from that mountain as it was going to have to give, on that side. And sometimes that's how, the Himalayas are. You just got to let them go.
Is there a point before an expedition like that where you do congregate and say, priority number one is we all survive? Or is it just in those moments where you're making those life or death situations at the top of a mountain with your friend, really not in a good way? Is it just the alpinist code that's what you're going to try and do regardless? Or,
I mean, human life should always be above everything else. I mean, that's what I would tell the world today. It's like, look, man, I mean, I love business as much as anybody. I love advertising, like all the things that go into me being able to be a filmmaker that are to build the foundation to enable that and to tell stories. Those are all awesome things. But like, you gotta, when someone's health is involved, that should always be the precedent. Like all those other things are things that are going to work out, and they're, you're just, often they're just a bunch of numbers moving around. But when someone's heart is beating, that is not a number. And that's got to be the number one driver. If you're filming, you need to turn the camera off and you need to focus on getting people out of there. Because why would you, I mean, if you value someone enough to trust them to belay you on the mountain or to be there to be your partner, then you absolutely, in my mind, there would be no question that if we were called upon in any situation or scenario to save somebody's life, like that would hold priority on any other part of it. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if everyone feels that way. We never had to have those conversations. There was never any question that we wouldn't, get John off the mountain before we would ever consider another step up,
Hmm.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Yeah, nice. In any situation when you're outdoors, you've always got to have that awareness that you could be in mountain ranges that are in Scotland, and yeah, they're not 8,000 meter peaks like the Himalayas or 7,000, 6,000, but they're bloody dangerous if you're out there and you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And altitude is one factor. You've got to, I mean, I think of like one of these big projects I have going over the next couple of years is this mega, 2,200 kilometer trail in China. And it goes between 500 meters and 5,000 meters. And the 5,000 meters part scares me less than being in the grasslands of, Eastern Tibet and being like, where, a guy like me in the grasslands hiking around, okay, it sounds fun until it's sideways sleet and hail. And then it's like, where do I go? I've got to set up a tent. There's no trees. There's no cover. There's no water source. There's nowhere to hide. I'm wet. That's more dangerous than being on the side of the mountain,
Yeah.
You got to be aware of all those factors. We're just little animals kind of scurrying around.
Yeah, I was going to say, dude, if you ever do need anyone to carry that tent or cameras, you just on that trek, you just let me know because I've got some time. My schedule's clean.
You are welcome, and I will take you up on that, and I guarantee you're going to have to join me for a section of that trail. It'll be one of my. I will treasure that experience with you, like we would have treasured Japan, like we would have treasured Australia.
I will warm your hands as you throw into a plastic bag, man. I promise you that.
And I'll make some noodles for you.
Legend. So, man, it's how did you go from being so fiercely engaged in that way of life and loving those mountains so much and those experiences and those, those times? How did you go from that to changing your identity as a person and moving back to the, Telluride and after that 2012 expedition and just saying, I'm done, like that transition and that change of identity must have been one big shock to your ego, for lack of a better explanation.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I had never invested in it as my identity, I told all my sponsors, I was like, that's it, everybody, that's it. And I said, but I'm going to go try and do this thing called Nolan's 14 next summer. So like, if anyone wants to stay involved because I'm going to do that, that's cool. I just was like, don't even worry about it. And everybody was like, what? Like, and it was like, well, I mean, it just, I knew it was the time. I knew it wasn't going to last forever. Unfortunately, so many of my friends didn't know. And I just didn't want it to end poorly. And I feel like I was able to reconcile. I didn't know how, I wasn't aware how poorly I had affected other people, like my parents, like my wife at that time, like other friends who worried about me greatly. I didn't realize the extent that I had affected them in their emotional, capacities to put up with that. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it was harder to sort of reconcile like having some empathy finally having the awareness to match that empathy, to be like, damn, I need to make sure that these folks feel whole again, and like they're not going to lose me, like I'm not going to go away here. And so I had something else to fill my life with, and it was the same thing everyone, I mean, not everyone has, but the same thing that most of us are all kind of looking for, is just kind of each other. And I feel like, not I've never I mean, I like my identity as a film director, storyteller. Like, that's what I am. That's all I want to be. I want to be the best at that I can possibly be. And that's, just means I show up a lot and try. So yeah, it never really felt like I wasn't killing a part of myself or losing a part of myself. I was more or less just taking a part of myself that I had just run out. I had just run to the end and had to say, this is in you. It's impossible to look at like a picture of K2 and not see a line down it. Like, when I look at the north face of it, and people are always like, well, what would you go back and do? I would go solo the north face of Everest and ski it without oxygen quickly. Why not? But I don't think anyone in my life wants me to. And I know there are sponsors that would underwrite that right now. They'd be like, dude, I would love to see how that turns out. But it's not worth it, because the identity that's most important to me is my role as a father, as a husband, as a son, as a brother. Those things I need to make sure that those relationships, that I'm working on those and I'm invested in those relationships more than, my relationship to nature. My relationship to nature has been very much take. And I need to be giving in this other capacity, and that just feels more balanced. It wasn't easy, don't get me wrong, but it's just felt like just sort of the adaptation and changes that we all have to face that give us the strength to move through the mountains like that are useful in life. Not might not make me successful at business, might not make me successful as a filmmaker, may not make me successful as a code writer, in a computer. But at least it would, those fundamental caring for other people, looking out for your partners, and trying to contribute, those are skills from the mountains, I think, that should be ingrained in everybody's identity.
Yeah, I think, and I think that's a great reason why people should book in those outdoor expeditions, and it doesn't have to be anything epic, but just go out camping with a bunch of people and just reconnect on that level, as opposed to sitting inside and watching a movie together. Like, you don't really connect in those kind of settings. Like, let's be honest. It's a different world when you bring the elements of the outdoors into a situation and you face a little bit of adversity. Maybe it's just no adversity, but you're just in the outdoors and fresh air and you're just enjoying it. Like, it's a really incredible little ecosystem to grow some connection. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, creating the space for that, like, you don't know what you might discover. I mean, you just don't know. And sometimes it's a part of a friendship that you maybe just you didn't have time to let that grow until you went outside. It's important stuff.
So you said it wasn't easy, and I think that probably led towards you going on this mission to conquer the Nolan's 14, which was that, like, you say that you kind of retired from the Himalayas, but you really commenced a pretty solid career in making sure that you tried as hard as you could to complete the Nolan's 14. Can you take us through those attempts? Like, not all of it, but it was Nolan's 14 is like a big mission. Maybe you could just give us a little bit of an insight to exactly what it is and your relationship to it.
Yeah, I mean, that first trip with Ben Delosier, living in the back of my 1999 Ford Explorer, we first started climbing in the Sawatch, in that whole range. That's where ultimately that's where my 14er experience beyond Mount Rainier began. And that was my first impression of Colorado. And, knowing it was like, well, here's a way, loving the mountains like I do, and loving big days. I think I still really want big days, but I thought of 60 hours as like a big day back then. now a big day to me with 2 kids is like getting out of the house for 10 hours, and so I just thought, I was like, man, this just sounds like a really great, safe way for me to continue to build on my fitness. Most people in my family die of heart disease, and so I didn't want that. And fitness is a big part of avoiding that for my family, for me. And Nolan's just became, a really great opportunity to get to know one range. When I moved to Telluride, I wanted to explore every valley around it. And this suddenly gave me the opportunity to develop a skill set that would give me the ability to move these massive distances around my own valley to explore and to see all the peaks and valleys there. And once I kind of tapped that out, I was like, well, I'm going to go and I'm just going to figure out all these 14ers and enjoy this adventure. And I had liked it because, Osprey Packs at that time was like, you know what, we're not going to let you go. We actually want to develop a running pack around this. If you'll stay on, we'll actually support you more, because we think this is a cool activity. And, you're not racing. We don't expect you to win anything. But if you want to build a pack for this and we can go to market with it, great, we'll do it. And so I had a lot of support to go out and just try to fail. I mean, I think it's really important to learn how important failure is in understanding and getting educated. So I got a coach, Matt Hart, helped me retune my body from being a skier and climber. I was always a runner, because in the summer my friends were guiding and I was working for the TV station or out making movies or out at the newspaper. So I would have the weekends to go do these big runs. So doing a 20-mile run through the mountains during that time in my 20s and early 30s was kind of already something I was looking forward to every summer to do anyway. And so, yeah, once I dove into it, I went and, ultimately, like, that kind of gives you the pretext to why it was important to me. But what I got from it was this wild ride of just watching that process go from this complicated, like, don't know anything, have been to all the summits of these peaks before, but never really thought about connecting them, because it's some pretty rough terrain, at times, like rough terrain. And then, it went from coordinating crews, getting the weather and the timing, which I absolutely sucked at ever getting the weather right on those initial times, because we're trying to schedule all these people to show up and do all this crewing, until eventually after like 4 or 5 times, I guess, with crews, I just was like, you know what? I just want to completely, like, just do this by myself and not count on anyone to do it anymore. And I had come through a divorce at that time too. And so it was, here I was at that time, I was for a limited while, I was the sole decision maker. So we would have defined that as like sole custody back in the day. So it was just me and my boy during the day. And then I could train for a few hours, for about 4 hours a day. Some days I could train all day with a sitter when he went to his mom. But my life had gotten really simple. And I wanted to prove to myself that I really didn't need anybody's approval or permission to believe that, I could do this. I had built up enough confidence, and I didn't need to enlist anyone else. Everyone had given me the confidence, had given me the support, and had showed up for me so much. I felt like I owed it to myself now to kind of prove that I could do it. And, I started going out there solo on it. And the last attempt that I made on it, I had gone 80 something miles. I was like by myself for 50 something hours. And eventually I found myself, well, I guess after 45 hours, I found myself on Mount Yale, which is like number 10 of 14 on southbound. And my son had developed some kind of a cold or whatever the week before. And, obviously we're around each other all the time at that point. So I get his cold. I don't really realize it. And I'm cruising 7 hours at a time and stopping for about 15 minutes every 7 hours, having a cup of coffee, having a snack, like a piece of pizza or something I'd made that I could eat. And then just moving again, just walking it out, not running, not anticipating seeing anyone. And I found I was like, man, I'm having the most pleasant time. There's no one out here for me to share the misery or any of the low points with. And I'm finding that because I can't tell anybody that, I'm really enjoying myself. There's like no, there's like nothing to bring me down. I just started to realize I was like, I am the piece of shit when I am the piece of shit. I am the problem when I am the problem. Like I am the resentment when I am the resentment. Like it kind of started to teach me all these things on this massive quest across it. And I get to Yale, and all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? I don't need this sleeping bag. I don't need this emergency stuff. I'm entering the second night now. I've been alone for 45 hours, and I dump that stuff, and I immediately take my heart rate from 120 to 160 and just start beating it up the side of the mountain because it's really technical and really nasty going up the backside of Yale. And I just wanted to punch it out. Well, by the time I got above tree line, stars are out. It's a beautiful night. I was just completely tired and needed to take a 15-minute nap. Lay down for 15 minutes. My cell phone went off the timer and I started having pulmonary edema. My lungs started to gurgle and I started to spit up some like nasty looking stuff. And, I started making bad decisions. Just had been alone for so long and had wanted to meet this limit. I had never met my limit in the Himalayas and I wanted to meet this limit, and I started meeting it, making bad decisions. I went over the top of Yale. I went down the East Ridge, which was the plan, but it was the wrong plan at that time. It was the plan when I started, and I should have been more flexible if I wanted to complete it. But it was about reaching this limit, And so I'm like yelling at the mountain. I'm like, got out this big flashlight, trying to figure out where I'm at. I'm like, just losing my mind, I've never told anybody this story, by the way, anyway. I mean, not definitely not publicly. So you're getting the full, and I just become a shit show, man. I become the most worthless, just worthless human being. Shouldn't be in the mountains at that time. And I realized it's like, this is a part of me. This is like what ultras taught me, was that like, there are times you are you and you are totally not. And you have to remember that it passes, but you're also responsible for it passing. And so I'm just bumbling my way down the mountain. Eventually I get down and I can't find where the Colorado Trail intersects it because none of my, I didn't want my phone on. I didn't want to talk to anyone the whole time. I didn't want to rely on anybody. I just been completely unplugged. And then I get down there and I lay down for like 2 hours hoping the sun will come up. And I wake up and all of a sudden I'm really cold. So I like start texting my dad and I'm like, how close am I to the trail? Wakes him up at like 4 a.m. And, he's like, freaking out. And so my dad's like, you need to keep heading this direction. I'm hypoxic. I'm combative because I'm tired. I've been raging, just raging pissed because I'm so confused at who I am and why I'm doing it. And I'm stuck out there at, hour 48 or 50 now, just like such a piece of crap. And, I start moving and I finally find the trail. I get down, sun's rising and I'm like, whoa, I'm tired again. Boom, I hit the ground. I take another nap. I get back up 15 minutes later. I run down to the valley and I get down to the valley in between Princeton and Yale and my lungs are still gurgling and the sun's out. And I'm like, man, all right, I'm feeling better. I'm finally down low again. I'm not up at altitude. I'm feeling better. And you'll laugh when you realize what I totally neglected to do this whole time. It might've turned me into such a piece of shit. And I tell myself that as soon as I start walking uphill, if I'm having more gurgles, then I'm going to quit. So I'm making about 800 feet in elevation up Princeton, and I'm still like coughing it up, gurgling everywhere. Sit down. Finally, I brew a cup of coffee. The first calories that I've had in like 10 or 12 hours, of just epicing through this whole mess. And I brew that cup of coffee. I take 2 sips. And I just go, man. I said, I quit. What? This is it. Why the fuck am I out here? It's just like,
oh God,
simple as that. Like, just what the hell am I doing? Who cares? Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's never going to matter. I know this range. I've had a good time. Now that I've had some calories, I'm coming back to my senses. And I'm like, oh my God, this was awesome. This was awesome. And like all of a sudden a buddy of mine like totally drives up. He texts my inReach, like people from across the state, like realized that they thought I was going to finish, and they saw me, suddenly really slowing down and stopping and kind of epicing. And only a few people really realized that shit was probably going down. So they started driving toward where I was. And this buddy of mine, Devin Ballett, shows up, and he walked up, and he said it was like, he's kind of like walking up on like a rabid dog, He really, you got twigs in your hair, and you had this like neon Patagonia yellow nano puff jacket, just shredded and dirty, black dirt, red dirt, green dirt. I mean, moss on it. You just looked like a feral rabid dog sitting there. And he didn't quite know how to approach me. And he showed me, I like look up at him. I'm like, hey, I'm fine. Don't, I'm like, you want some coffee? And he's like, holy shit, dude. He's like, you look like you've been through some shit, bro. And I was like, oh, don't worry. I was rolling around the ground earlier. I was sleeping, And so, I mean, yeah, ultimately the biggest, most epic failure of all time, if completing it was necessary to reach the limit. But I can say I got my ass completely handed to me. When I finally got the weather window, that I made a movie about it, and it was clear that it's difficult, and it's clear that weather influenced the earlier ones. But this time I had perfect weather. This was my fault, totally my fault. But I reached the limit, and I thought, yeah, fuck it, I'm done. I get it. I have taken from this all that it can give, and I have given to this all that it can take, and I need to walk away. And then the next year, I went to Bhutan, and I set the speed record on the snowman trek. And it was like, never would have had the confidence to go do something like that and stay focused through that had I not gone through so many massive failures on Nolan's 14,
So dude,
Yeah.
I think so that was on your 6th attempt at doing that, right? I think that you reached that limit that you say. And Nolan's 14 is summiting all of the 14ers in the Savage range.
Yeah, 14 of them.
Yeah,
in a succession. Yeah,
and you've got to do it in under 60 hours.
Well, you should, because otherwise, it's just, if you've got the power to do it in 70, go for it. But the closer you get to 60 hours without that sleep, I think you just sort of turn into you're hitting some walls.
Yeah, like the snowman Ben that was out there that day. Yeah, man, that brings us to the next epic, which, you had such an incredible, career, for lack of a better concise way to, describe it, out in the Himalayas, a career out there. Then you came back and you had your time as being a father and an adventurer, getting after the Nolan's 14. And then, you I guess throughout this whole time, you started to really kind of adopt that other life of filmmaking and documenting and things like that. I know you were doing that a lot beforehand, but I guess, which is an awesome thing, because all of these things that you talk about, you can really go back and you've got that Nolan's 14 video out there.
You got the Rest of Everest podcast that was, chronicled my entire Everest expedition and won all these iTunes awards. Got Ski the Himalayas. You can go find that everywhere. That chronicles a lot of our the ski descents and stuff we did. And it's just this huge life's work of committed to just sharing the story, right?
And then you've also got the snowman trek, which is one that you we swing back around to when you hit a little. we're in New Zealand and we're hopping out of this boat, and I'm like, oh yeah, Ben, we're gonna move or else we miss the runners, and you're just like on the edge of this boat. It's like, I kind of noticed it. I'm like, why is he so hesitant? We're on a time limit. Like, let's bust the move, Ben. And you hop out of this boat in like ankle deep water, and your boots get saturated, my feet get saturated, and then the next thing I know, like, I'm already up the trail making a move, and you come behind me, and you're like, yeah, man. I really didn't know I was going to get my feet wet. And I was like, yeah, but like we're in New Zealand. It's like part of every day, pretty much.
Yeah.
We hopped in a boat, like what? Yeah, and then yeah, you don't understand, man. I didn't really know I was going to get my feet wet. I was like, what is up, man? Like, what are you talking about? And then after about 30 minutes, you're like, "Jeez, my boots are saturated, dude. Like they're saturated. I've got water like in like my whole foot is saturated." And I'm like, so's mine, so's everyone else's. What's the big deal? Like, you're a big time outdoors man. What are you talking about? And you're like, okay, dude, after this is all over, I'm going to send you a link to this movie, The Snowman Trek, and it's going to give you the insight as to why I never want to get my feet wet again. Okay. And I was like, all right, dude, like, I get it. No worries. Sorry if the dog's going a bit crazy. But so yeah, you went and did this snowman trek, which is a fastest known time on the snowman trek with a bunch of people that a lot of that are really well known in the ultra running world. And
Yeah.
yeah, and tell us about that epic and what it was like to come up with that idea. Like you said, that Nolan's 14 gave you the confidence to do that. So yeah, like that is something that often comes up when we were chatting. And tell us a bit about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I had always I felt like with the Himalayas, I wanted to do first ski descents. I wanted to do first rock and ice ascents. I mean, I was really into pioneering stuff. And the one thing that, I felt like hadn't been done in the Himalayas, at least for me, was distance. And I knew, knowing my history now, if anyone's made it this far in the podcast and they don't completely hate my guts, at this point in time, you realize you're like, man, this guy has to kind of resist the urge to climb big peaks. Like, it's important. But I wanted to be in them, and I wanted to revisit the Himalayas. And so from 2012 until 2016, I didn't leave the country. I was in the United States. I was focused on Charlie, my son. And, I had done, what was it, like 30, I think 37 expeditions up to that point, and just did nothing for 5 years. And then suddenly, boom, there I am in Bhutan on the snowman trek. And it had always been my dream, because when I was climbing the Himalayas, I'd always heard about Bhutan, and I'd heard of the snowman trek for years, that it was just this high failure rate. Not a lot of people get through it. It takes a month. It's in Bhutan. You can't climb the peaks there. It just has all this mystique that really attracted me, is from an adventure standpoint. And I was like, well, I want to go there and I want to experience it. And I want to know, am I going to be haunted by the peaks? I just need to know I can go to a place where I can't climb them and just see them and figure out how I really feel about this now. What do I feel? Have I made this change? And, I started looking for the right people and a good team to experience that with, and luckily met Timmy Olson and had gone out and done a run or two with him in Telluride. And then we had gone and had a big night on Mount Princeton once, training on the Nolan's 14 course, which was a lot of fun. And now he was game to try something completely new. And, I gotta say, like, he had a very different experience than you would expect to have, coming from his background, and he got through it. And Anna Frost was the other teammate that we had. I met Anna and immediately knew, I was like, she's going to be schooling me every day on some stuff. She is just a world-class person and an exceptional athlete, straight shooter with great leadership style. And, so it's three people with some pretty proven leadership experience, and, definitely on a quest for a big adventure, matched up with, what I had always understood was that you wanted to go through a Nepali guide service to connect with the people in Bhutan to get your expeditions organized, because there's a lot of weird financial rules around Bhutan and how they manage tourism and the whole organization of stuff. So I had worked with the same people who had helped me do all the stuff in the Himalayas and led us to our base camps all the time, and trusted their advice on a guide service. And in June of that year, signed up and said, we want to do this in 14 days. And they were like, I think that's impossible. But they went ahead and they took the money and said, yes, we can make that happen. Like, this is the story that doesn't get in the film. But the week before we left, I was in California shooting the Tahoe 200 for a separate project. And all of a sudden I start getting emails and they're like, oh, Mr. Clark, you are going to love the new trek we have set up for you. We could not find any guides that wanted to do the 14-day trip on the Snowman Trek, but you are going to see great culture. You're going to see wonderful art. You're going to get to dance. You're going to get to eat. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm like, hell no, I am. Like, I'm not going there. Like, no, like Tim and Anna are not going to understand this. I don't want to do it. I'm like, I didn't just come out here and go and get the sponsorships and we got the funding to make a movie. I mean, it was, it's just a lot of stakeholders involved that had trained for it and had expectations around us being able to go in there and set that record, at least try it. And so, there were some other miscommunications, which were my fault. Anna had tried to connect me with a friend she had locally who was also a guide. I had communicated directly with my Nepali folks, who then had communicated directly with the guide service. We thought we had that person going with us. Because his name was Renzin. The name of the person they contacted was also Renzin. Thought it was the same person. My fault. And as it turns out, it wasn't. And the guy who shows up is a guy named Wang Chuk, I think he's the star of the film, because he showed up had never done the entire Snowman Trek before. Neither had the cook that accompanied us. Both of them were not the most experienced expedition leaders, especially not for a speed ascent with the awesome history and experience that Tim and Anna had. And a ragtag team of people who they assembled that were basically like cousins, because the cook had been on a trip the month before, a month-long trip on the Snowman Trek, and he told all the people that had come with him as liaisons for that they, in order to get that month-long trip, they had to also do this 14-day trip. Well, when he got back, they were all like, no, see you later. Thanks for paying me for the month-long trip. We are not going on this 14-day trip. Wang Chuk shows up at the airport late to pick us up, and immediately Anna's like, this is not a good sign. And I'm like, what can I say? I've never worked in Bhutan. This is my first trip here. She was right. She had been there before. I should have listened to her more. And I don't wish I had now, because we had a great experience from a drama side, but I think we would have had a different and also very culturally richer experience had we worked with her people. And man, Wang Chuk shows up 20 minutes late, and sure enough, that's because a boulder had rolled down the mountain and hit his car while he was driving there to come pick us up, and it nearly killed him. And he said, the worst is already out of the way. Now I know if this is an auspicious reason, we can go and we can try to do the Snowman Trek. And he tries to talk me down to 21 days. And I'm like, look, man, I don't have more money for this. I don't have more time for this. Neither do they. And we just got to, every day, we just got to talk at the end of the day, talk about how it's going and see what we can do. And, every day we did that. And the one person I haven't mentioned yet is Chris Ord, who also was with us. And Ordy is by far one of the most solid expedition leaders, trail runner, event organizer. I mean, he is such an asset to have along with you. And I didn't mention him because he had come in and we didn't have the time or the budget for him to come a week earlier to properly acclimatize. And he was coming from Anglesey in Australia, where he's living at sea level. And although he's a very experienced and rock solid trail runner and guy, he just didn't have enough time to acclimatize. And even at the pace that we were going, which I think all of us look back and say was well under the threshold for performance, within 5 days, we were flying him out at 14,000 feet from this location in the middle of nowhere because he had succumbed to pulmonary edema. So we couldn't have gone faster. And while we're on that expedition, all of a sudden Chris was there because he's a very talented cinematographer. and someone who I respect greatly for his ability to tell the story in trail running. So I really thought of him as just this incredible storytelling asset that would allow me to have someone to confer with and like create this film. And, you know, I think he's a really great shooter, and the stuff that he got while he was there was great. And he suddenly leaves, and it's like, now it's Tim and Anna has been up all night with him thinking he's going to die. He was claustrophobic, wouldn't get in the Gamow bag to save his life. And Tim is just like thinking, oh, what train wreck am I on? Should I get on that helicopter and get out of here? Because he wasn't confident in the guides. And he's starting to see the whole thing as a speed, record kind of fall apart. Well, you know, at that moment, leading that trip and being the one who's basically got all the responsibility on them and all of the weight and everything that's gone wrong ultimately ends up coming back to me. I just was like, you know what? To hell with it. I'm going to keep the camera rolling. I'm going to keep leading this trip. We're going to see how this turns out. I know what I'm doing. I know that adventures like this and an expedition like this that no one's tried to do here before, if we just get it done, then it will change. It will change how Bhutan sees trail running. It will change how people see expeditions. It will, we'll make the movie and we'll get to share this amazing experience and see what happens. And so just day after day after day, I shot the film. It was on me to shoot all of it. And then I came back and, had a great editor and had the folks invested in it. Blue Fox Entertainment was a great distributor. And lo and behold, the finishing time was 15 days. It was 14 nights and 15 days. We hit it. We took one rest day because the crew got worn down. And absolutely, they had no training like Anna, Tim, or myself to do that. They totally did it. They were rock stars for feeling their absolute lowest every morning when they were starting up to move that many days. They took one day where they needed to take the day off before they did a 40K to end the thing. A 40K, like, how do you do that? So, I think that it didn't result in a greater relationship between everyone. There was a lot of tension in that expedition and drama in that expedition that I think definitely rang through in the film. And I think everyone was okay with how we were. We were needing to change as people. We were there to try to contribute and show what a fun thing trail running is. And now, that film came out. Bhutan was very excited about it, supported it greatly. It went in all these theaters in the US. It became an iTunes bestseller. And now they have a snowman race because we went and we did that. And so it's like, yeah, that's why I always look back at Nolan's 14 and I think, man, that was this big failure, but it didn't change the map and change what people are going to do in Colorado. Whereas here we actually went to a culture and said, as ambassadors of that sport, people should be doing this, and you should be trying to get people to your country that do this, so you continue to have good tourists that will care for this place. And the only adverse side effect is that next time I get in a boat with you, I'm still going to complain about my feet getting wet. Because, dude, when my feet were wet for 2 weeks straight, and Tim's feet were wet for 2 weeks straight, Anna's feet were wet for 2 weeks straight, it just did not make for a good time. Every morning you're waking up and you're putting your wet feet into wet shoes, into knee-deep mud. I mean, the most unrunnable terrain you can imagine, rocks. I mean, then you're in a day where it snows all day and you don't see anything but despair. I mean, you just get soaked nonstop. It was just like the most epic, wet, all-time worst environment in history that I've had to go through ever. And, it's not like that for everybody. You can have a good time there, but for me, it scarred me forever. And Tim said it carried with him for a long time too. It was about a year after that, I think both of us could finally like look out the window, and if it was even drizzling, we could be like, all right, I can handle this. Like I can go out today and I can do my run. I'll be okay. I'll make it back here in a few hours and get dry again. It's totally scarring.
Okay, I can appreciate that, and like you said, I can adapt to welcome that part of you as a person. And if you do complain, that's all right, man. That's all right, because you did it for the sport. At the end of the day, you did it for the greater good of the sport.
Yeah, Yep. And I hopped out of that boat and I was uncomfortable and I was a little bit sad with myself that I hadn't prepared better. But at the same time, I just kept shooting because it's the same principle. It's like, I'm just here to be a tool and to try to add something to this sport, just like I try to add things to these other sports and hopefully get people excited about the journey. And, it's not without some discomfort. Even when as many experiences I've had, I can still just be totally just just unagreeable to a situation, but still have to get through it and still try my best.
So, dude, as you said, with all the experiences that you have had, what are the pieces of advice you can give to people out there that might want to either get into the outdoor industry, which I know right now is not looking good just because of the whole situation with COVID-19, but
Totally.
like you're an incredibly successful filmmaker now, director. You've made a lot of incredible films, which I highly encourage people to go check out. And so what advice do you have for people that may want to look or have that curiosity about getting into that part of the outdoor industry or the outdoor industry as a whole, as a guide, as a alpinist? Like what do you say to people out there who want to scratch that itch but don't know really how to do it just yet?
I would just say show up. Just show up. Like everyone's a wannabe, and I've been a wannabe to wannabe stuff my whole life. There's still things I want to be. And it's okay. You've got to be a wannabe at some point. You've got to be okay with knowing that when you start something, when you're beginning something, whether you're a never ever or you're experienced at something else, or you got a degree but you don't really know how to learn, you don't know your learning type, just show up. You may have something to lose. That's okay. Sacrifice means there is some consequence, but sometimes there's a reward. And if you just show up and you give it a shot, that's better than not trying. And if you keep trying, even if all the indicators are telling you that you're the problem and you suck, eventually, if you get any better at it, and if you're finding joy, even if you're not getting the results you want, then you're getting the result you want. Because it's pretty easy to find less joyful journeys out there that don't get you those results either. And so I just think if you just show up and you give it a shot, you have a greater chance of finding that joy. If you're judging yourself by whether you finish things or not, that should come later. Not in, like I pride myself. I like to finish things. I like finishing things. I like deadlines. I like creativity. I like the challenge of that. That's why I make movies, because at some point you have to finish it and put it out. But like when it comes to these outdoor pursuits that feed my soul, it's like, the joy is the value. Joy is the reward. If you're measuring yourself up against somebody else, that's okay. You need to know where you stand sometimes, or you need to know who's better than you so you can ask them how to get better. But like the one thing you can't do is be afraid to just show up and try, and then to move through those painful times when you're not seeing the success you want, but you are getting some joy from it, because it just doesn't get better than enjoying what you're doing. That's it. You could have had all the money in the world right now, and if it were in stocks, yeah, peace, good luck. I mean, I sit there and I have so many projects that are so important to me right now, and they're all, they're just, my expectations are changing by the moment. But I've experienced joy doing what I do. I miss creativity, and I miss the communities where I get to create the most. And I realize the joy that I have in doing that is why I'm still doing what I do. And the accomplishments add up because the joy is adding up more.
I think everyone can take something from that, even if you're not going to go into the outdoor space, because that's something that applies to everything,
Yeah.
And I think it kind of brings up this concept that I was chatting about with a friend the other day of achievements versus success, and how achievements can be this like tangible thing that can be measured, and it could be like a trophy or a position or a time. They're very tangible and that you can quantify them. And success is more about achieving your why, like successfully getting out there and like and getting after the reasons why you do it, and being able to do that regardless of the achievement or the quantifiable metrics that come with that, and I think that's
Yeah.
probably like that joy is kind of that success. It's a deeper rooted sensation of achievement, that you're getting after, man.
Yeah, and it's fun. I mean, sometimes the goals sometimes move way out, don't they, while you're trying to reach them. I mean, sometimes you're like, I'm going to go do this. And like Snowman Trek, I mean, we got on that trail and they were like, it's to be 21 days. And I was like, this will be 14. We'll get it down to that. And I'm just every day. And it was like, it just kept feeling when Chris flew out, it just felt like it was so far away. But I was like, this is still day by day by day. And then suddenly you just, kind of like when you get to the 70 miles in a 100-mile race, right? It's like, wait a minute. This felt really far away when I started, but now we could reel this in, now, like, I mean, you start to see it and it will approach, but there's always that point. Every thing that I can list as an accomplishment at some point had just some bleak hours of despair somewhere where I thought I would never get it, where I thought, man, I'm ruined because I've just, all the joy is gone. And now I'm overly committed. And all I have is I'm stuck in this situation and everyone else wants a different outcome and I want this outcome or whatever it is. And then it comes back because the joy recenters it, and that showing up and being willing to work through the phases of failure to eventually succeed at something is a lesson that, you just have to learn, right? I mean, and those goals, fuck, they're always out there. I mean, Nolan's 14 might be something I enjoy in my 60s, I don't know.
Yeah, I hope you I hope you get back to that ravenous state when you're 60 years old and you're just like, yes, this is what I knew I just needed before I moved on with my life again,
Right,
Oh, man, I'm so stoked that we're able to line up a conversation, and because
Me too,
really
man.
to be able to recount some of those stories it's just such a pleasure, and to listen to you get so animated about them, really, I just love it, man. And it's why I just really wanted to have a chat with you, and like you say, you do that with your films. You capture something and you throw it out there to the rest of the world to enjoy. And I guess part of this whole part of this podcast is to help create conversation, maintain conversation as a way we communicate, and also introduce people to someone like yourself who just has a way of looking at things, which is something that I wish I saw more of in this world. Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Well, back at you. I'm looking forward to all the future awesome stuff that we get to do because you're a kindred spirit. I mean, can't tell you how like not alone in the world I feel knowing you're out there, and that when I go into these experiences, it's like I know I've got someone else who's just as fired up and excited. I mean, we're not doing it for all these other reasons, and it's just fun to be in that moment and be like, we're gonna go get some fucking awesome footage today, like I know it's gonna happen. We are gonna do that, and it's great that you obviously you share that passion for connecting people and storytelling and exposing people to just different things. It's something I'm really flattered to know you and feel very honored that you asked me to do this, because man, I think the world of you, and I feel really lucky that I had the opportunity to spend that time with you, and that I know that on the other side of all this I get to see you again and to be like, dude, we're gonna have some great memories, and it's cool. I feel lucky you're in the world too, man.
All right, man. Thanks so much. It's one of those things that makes your heart fill with joy. And once all this passes, we will be able to have a mission again. Absolutely, mate.
Dude, we're gonna have some killer missions, man. It's gonna be the best.
All right, dude. Well, thanks again. Hey, I hope the family's doing well. Your mum, dad's doing well, and this all like passes, and you get to get back home and do whatever we've got to do there. But yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, man. It's like, having this time with my parents, As a 40-year-old dude, I never expected to be in their house for 3 weeks. And I'm like, we might be here 6, 8, 9, 12 weeks. Who knows till we can go back to New York. But that's the thing is it's just like, I feel so much for everybody around the world right now that's hurting. And, especially my friends in New York that are just scared out of their mind,
Yeah.
But it'll pass. It will pass. And, we all got to stay just safe and stay home and, try to not tempt the fate,
Yeah, this is, all we see at the moment is what's coming out of America. And it's numbers you don't want to comprehend, and there's scenes that you're just like, man. So all the best to you guys out there. We're all one world. So I hope you guys pull through as best you can.
Yeah, and you guys too. I mean, it is bad here. It is, it's bad. New York is bad. It's bad. Like the reports I'm getting on the ground are, from doctors there, and as I talk to people from the places. I care for the news, but I like to. It's worse than you think.
Yeah.
And
wow. Oh.
That's but New York is strong, and this time will pass. But you stay safe. All right. We got some cool shit to do, and I need you. I need you in my life doing fun stuff.
That's it, man. I think you summed it up. Don't tempt the fate. Like just chill and enjoy the silence and the things that we can't do by not doing them right now.
Yeah, it'll pass. It'll come back, and when it does, we got something to live for.
Totally, man. All right, dude. Much love. Love you. Keep it real. I'll
talk to you soon. All right, man. Take care, and thank you.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.
Well, there we have it. Ben Clark, filmmaker and explorer, and probably one of the most awesome dads going around. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to message us and let us know that you enjoyed it, please do so at Stokely Podcast on Instagram. We'd really appreciate it, and we'd love to hear from you, because that's what it's all about, maintaining the art of conversation. So start one with us, and we'll get back to you. Until next time, have a good one.